drivers that Weber did down here. So that was.
Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome to the Red and White Authority, episode number 16. I'm Art Regner along with Kevin Allen. And we are live as usual. I'm here in Detroit, and Kevin's in Nashville in the press room. Hear a little bit of our colleagues in the background chattering, but nonetheless, let's look at a lot of things going in the NHL, but certainly let's concentrate on the Red Wing game last night, game one between the Red Wings and the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Red Wings win this hockey game somehow by a score of 3-2. Amazing hockey game, amazing performance by Peter Mrazek. Detroit's penalty kill, very good as well. The Lightning were 0-for-7 with the man advantage. A couple of shorties by each team. A lot of up and down action, but most of it tilted in the side of the ice. So let's start there, Kevin. First and foremost, I know that the shot differential was like plus 50 or something in the first time in NHL history during the playoffs. So the winning team that was outshot by that much actually won. I tweeted kind of that Sizeman after this game must have been shaking his head and saying, "Man, this is the Red. I have built the Red Wings because." How many times, from a Detroit perspective, have we seen them totally outplay the other team for the most part, only to lose because a goalie steals the game in the playoffs? We can go to John Sebastian Pierre, Nikolai Hamilton, just to name a few, but an incredible game. But a lot of people are looking at it saying, you know what, we kind of did this last year against Boston with that scoring that goal late in the third period. To win game one, only to be swept out in five. So, what's your general take on what happened last night?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I was channeling Shigeru as well because that's really what it felt like, where it was a total domination by the Tampa Bay Lightning. But, I would say this. I think the Red Wings sensed early on that they had a chance with Mrazek playing the way he did, that they could win this game with great goaltending. And I think they started to play a more defensive system. They started to play just to get the puck out, and they didn't attack with as great an intensity as they normally would. And I thought it sort of reflected the idea that they felt this was their chance to win. A goalie. Win game. So I wouldn't read too much into the fact that they were totally outshot. I think it was just a matter of how that game, and as we all know, each game has its own identity. So I would expect that the Red Wings will mount more of an offensive attack in game two. And this is not a recipe that they can follow and expect long-term success. You can't count on your goalie, bailing you out with as many saves as Mrazek had. They're going to have to play a more well-rounded game, and I think they know that. But this wasn't a very important win for them, and I think more importantly, I think it sent a message that Detroit's goaltending, may be in good hands with Peter Mrazek if he plays this well. And I guess that's the question. Can he maintain this high level of play, maintain it for an extended period? Maybe the Red Wings do have something going here. So the Lightning are, a very impressive team. And as I said before, I think if they played this series 10 times, the Red Wings could win 2 or 3 of them. And, maybe this is one.
Well, I want to get right back to what you said about Mrazek. We've kind of been down this path before, with Mrazek especially, but occasionally with Jimmy, because for about the last 6 weeks, Mike Babcock was pleading with somebody to take this goaltending job. Neither one of them really firmly, put their grips upon it. And I think the biggest question is whether Peter Mrazek is for real. Is that we'll find out tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock in Tampa, because he has a habit of following up with a not so good, there was a stretch there where I think out of 5 starts he was pulled in 4 of them. So it's kind of dicey. I mean he was impressive, and he lives for the moment. We've always said that he's a very confident guy, but I think the most important game for him has to be tomorrow.
I would agree with that. I mean, I even though Mrazek doesn't have previous NHL experience, he obviously has made an extended run with the Grand Rapids team, and they won a championship. They won it in 4 rounds. So we know he has the durability to do this over an extended period of time because, he played well when they won the championship. So I think, it's not a case of him not having the strength and durability to go over an extended period. I think it's just a matter of kind of finding his way at the NHL level. So I got to believe that a guy who was already pretty confident is even more confident after that great performance. So now I think the trick for the Red Wings is to say, okay, we know we won a game like that, but we have to find a different way to win, and that's going to be the key. You're going to have to find a variety of different ways to try to win because, I think everybody who saw that game now truly understands, how awesome the Tampa Bay Lightning offensive attack can be. Like, they were really coming in waves, and Tyler Johnson was very visible. Hedman was very visible. Stamkos was visible. It was all the Tampa Bay Lightning, and the only standout for the Red Wings in that game. Well, actually, there wwere two standouts. I mean, Datsuk obviously, played well, and Clendening, was super as well. But those were the two guys that I think stood out. In addition to Mrazek being the star of the game.
Kevin, I think, any goaltender you ever talk about, they always say that the most difficult shot to defend is the backhand because they really have no idea where the puck is going to go. It's very tough to read where that shot's going. And, and again, your buddy Luke Glendening, if he continues to shoot the backhand, I think he could be a 30-goal scorer. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And I don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but shouldn't everybody know that that's exactly what he's going to do now? I mean, he prefers to go to that backhand, and it's a great shot, but, Bishop looked totally stunned on that. And, and granted, Val Filppula shouldn't be back there defending him, and Victor Hedman, I thought, kind of gave up on the play, which I couldn't believe because he's such a great defenseman. I mean, it seemed like the perfect wave hit Tampa last night in the form of everything the Detroit Red Wings did, for the most part, turned out to be right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, not only was Mrazek good, but Bishop was, didn't have the kind of game that the Lightning expect from him. He's really been a consistent goalkeeper, and that goal. Bishop can't give up that goal at that period of time, and I certainly appreciate the move that Clendening made. The little spinorama in that situation. I mean, you don't usually expect that from a fourth liner. But again, that was a hustle goal. The puck was out. He hustled after it. It was the end of a long shift too. I'm sure he was very tired, and he made that little move. And I really think he surprised Bishop, as you mentioned, on that backhand. He wasn't. I don't even think he was expecting this little spinorama move. But it was just one of those cases where. I think the Red Wings sensed early on that was their opportunity to win, and they played, to try to win like that, to capitalize on their few chances, and hope that Mrazek could bail them out. And boy, he really did too. Like, he was tracking the puck, really well. And we talked about this when Howard was going bad, where it just didn't seem like he could sense where the puck was going. And everybody who watched that game last night realizes that. Mrazek looked like he could track that puck all night long. Like, he was always where he should be in terms of being ready, even when he couldn't see the puck. It was pretty clear that he was, sort of feeling the game pretty well. So, and I tend to agree with you that tomorrow's game is crucial. Like, would you be shocked if the Lightning won at 6-1? Nah, you probably wouldn't. But this is a real opportunity for Detroit. Like, imagine if they could take a 2-0 lead in this series, coming back to Detroit. I think you would plant seeds of doubt with the Lightning, because let's try to remember that this is not a team that has a history of success in the playoffs with this group. This is a new group put together. This second line with Tyler Johnson and Palat and Kucherov. I mean, this is a young group. This team, even on defense, they've come in from different places. Obviously, Boyle and Strawman have had playoff success. They were in the finals last season, but for the most part, in fact, I think a lot of the defensemen have been to the final, but they haven't won a cup. So for the most part, I think this is a Lightning team that's still trying to find its way as well. I would expect Garrison to be back, and I think he'll help the team. He's got a big shot, and that'll be just one more offensive weapon if they need another, because he's a big booming slap shot from the point.
We talk about it, and I know some people just kind of, shake their heads. The Red Wings have made 24 consecutive seasons in the playoffs, but I think what that at least does is that they have a bit of a legacy. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but they've been there, and I think you can tell that there is a kind of a calming influence on that team. They never seem to be too high or too low, regardless of what's happening, and that could work to their distinct advantage, because if they somehow pull off the improbable tomorrow and beat Tampa there, Tampa's not a really good road team. They won 32 games at home this year. I'm not saying Detroit's going to sweep. I already said 7 games, and I think that Tampa's going to, eventually win this series. But the Red Wings, I think,
There you go.
and I guess what I'm trying to say, there is something to being in the playoffs 24 consecutive seasons, and I think you saw it in last night's game, because Detroit, even though they were outplayed, they never looked like they were in any kind of panic mode, and only for a couple of times in the third period did I even think that the Red Wings, or especially Peter Mrazek, were even scrambling, looked out of place. I mean, it was kind of textbook, because they kept everything to the outside too, as you said. I mean, in a strange sense, in a game where the statistics dominated Tampa, I don't think the Red Wings I know they can play better, but I don't think they played all that poorly either. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
Well, for what they were doing, I think they played very well. Again, Mike, I think my only point is I think they identified what kind of game they were in and where they had their best chance to win, and they embraced that. They started to play, in a shell. They sort of bunkered up. And, I think Babcock, looked pretty brilliant with the Marchenko move. Marchenko had a couple times, I think, when he stumbled once, but for the most part, at the end of the game there, I found it amazing that who Babcock chose to, use out there. I mean, he has Mrazek in, who had no previous NHL playoff experience, and then, Ferraro was out there late in the game, Clendening was out there late in the game, Marchenko was out there late in the game. He had a lot of confidence in a lot of the younger players, so it was really sort of fascinating to watch that. But I really felt that as you said, the experience probably paid off in their ability to identify their best opportunity to win, and to, play, as we've talked in the past, maybe more simple defensive style. When it was pretty clear that their main objective was just getting the puck out of their zone. A few times when it forever looked like Tampa Bay was on a power play, even when they weren't. They had so much puck possession. So it was really a fine win, but I just don't think it's a kind of win that can be duplicated 3 more times in the series. You can't expect to win 3 other games where you're dominated at that level. So they're going to have to find a different way to win.
Kevin, we were all worried about Peter Mrazek, obviously, because in Detroit and Ben Bishop. I've always thought, and going back to this time in Nashville as well, or I mean in St. Louis, pardon me, here in Nashville, that the Red Wings performed well against them. I mean, he played well against them, but the question was how is Ben Bishop going to perform? I read a couple of the columns today in the Tampa Tribune, and they're kind of raking him over the coals, saying he gave up. The first 2 goals like that, he couldn't do anything. One was he redirected it perfectly. Then the other one, I don't think he even saw it. He kind of screamed ahead of him. But what about Ben Bishop? I mean, Chris Osgood said on television last night, and I saw him on the NHL Network earlier today, and he said the same thing. Listen, I think Bishop, the Red Wings will get to him and start peppering him. He may not even last game 2. I mean, maybe the guys are thinking, but how concerned should Tampa be about Ben Bishop?
Well, it's not like he has a lot of NHL playoff experience to draw on. So I think, you can't say like you would with the veteran goal. Let's compare the situation to Chicago deciding that, Corey Crawford gets pulled after 1 period in the opening game against Nashville, and Darling comes in and just turns in an incredible relief performance. So, yesterday when asked who was starting game 2, Quenneville said basically that Crawford is coming back in, and some people could question that because Darling was so incredible as reliever, but Quenneville's logic is sound. It's body of work. 20 bad minutes doesn't erase the fact that Crawford has had 32 winning playoff performances and a Stanley Cup championship ring. So the same now is true here with the Tampa Bay Lightning. We are allowed to be concerned if we're Tampa Bay fans that Bishop was not good in his first NHL playoff start because he has no body of work. We don't have any basis for comparison, and this is all new. Like it really is, as everybody knows, the playoffs are a completely different season. The pressure is much more acute in the postseason, and you could see it on that. His reaction when he gave up that third goal to me sort of set it off. That he knew that he had just given up just a crucial goal because that gave the Red Wings a little bit of a cushion they really needed. So I don't know that I believe, as Ozzy does, that he's going to collapse to the point that he could be pulled. But I think now you have to conclude that the jury is still out, that we don't know what kind of playoff goal he's going to be. You don't know. You can't say a guy is a good playoff goalie until he actually plays well, in the playoffs. And what limited experience that now Bishop has, was not a fruitful one.
When you look at, let's go back to the Red Wings. Obviously Tampa dominated. You said Detroit kind of went into a defensive shell there, realizing this is the only way they're going to win. How concerned should Red Wings fans be? Because we talked about Tatar, we talked about Nyquist, we talked about Sheahan. Just like the Boston series, it's not that they're not trying or playing hard, but it's like they're in motion, but they're going nowhere. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
How concerned should we be about that? And how do you get those guys going, or will it take just a goal by one of them to start maybe feeling it a little bit?
Yeah, no, I think it's really crucial that those guys get going. Last night I remember I was watching the game and we were about 12 minutes in, and I actually said to myself as I watched from my hotel room here after covering practices all day, it doesn't feel like I've even seen Nyquist on the ice. He just really wasn't visible at that point. So, it's crucial. They've got to get. I thought Tatar, he was visible. We can all remember him. Getting involved, and I thought Sheahan as well. So you just need to mostly get Nyquist going, and maybe it'll just take a goal or maybe just an exceptional play because, you don't score as many goals as both of those players have over the last two seasons without being able to fight through defensive coverage. Now it's more acute now with because it's the playoffs, but I see that at some point they're going to break through because the Red Wings aren't going to win if Pavel Datsyuk is the only guy scoring goals. As good as he is, it's not. Usually you're talking about secondary scoring, but in this case we're talking about primary scoring. Like, they need. If Zetterberg is not the scorer he once was, and then it's even more crucial that you get goals from that line. And it's interesting. We talked about whether Datsyuk and Zetterberg should be playing together. Obviously last night it was clear they should. I mean, that was a pretty effective combination they had. I think that will continue in the next game. They're certainly not going to change a winning lineup.
I want to get into Justin Abdicator a little bit. He practiced. He's been practicing, but not really taking full drills from the way I understand it. And the Red Wings, I don't know if it was a bit of a ruse. They pack your equipment. He's coming with us. He's making the trip. He has no broken finger. And boom, 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 because it's playoff times. We know if it were Scotty, we know that he had probably a compound fracture. But it's just this flesh wound. He'll be fine. But I don't know. I mean, they need him, right? Especially in this series because they can't sustain any pressure. At least Abby goes to the net and fights his way through, and they need that presence. This is where not having the big bodies, even a Johan Franzen to a lesser extent, but an Eric Cole and Justin Abdicator, the Red Wings need to get anything going. I mean, Riley Sheahan can try to do it on his own, but he's about the only guy.
Yeah, it's playoffs are so fascinating. Like, does anyone believe that Mark Stone's setting out tonight's game in Ottawa? And what exactly is a microfracture? Is that just a fancy word for a bad bruise? Like, well, what is that exactly? A microfracture. I don't know what kind of injury Abdicator had, but if he could play, he would be in there. So, I think it's obviously more severe than, the Red Wings are allowing us to believe. Otherwise, I think he would be in the lineup. I don't think this is a pain tolerance issue, or he would be playing. I think this is a guy that's severely, injured. That doesn't mean he won't be ready soon, but yeah, I mean, I agree with that. The Red Wings. This is not the Red Wings of 2002 with 9 Hall of Famers. This is a team that needs everybody on the oars in order to be successful. So, right now, it feels like they only got 7 of 8 on the oars, and offensively, that's difficult for them. They need a guy like Abdicator, as you mentioned, to go to the net, and I think they really need him on the power play. Like, he had become very productive and getting in front. Like, nobody's ever going to replace Holmstrom, but it felt to me like Abdicator has found this niche to be able to get in front of the net and somehow get pucks into the back of the net, as Mickey likes to say, from in close.
Kevin, explain this to me. You're a very learned man. Fracture means fracture, right? So don't you think that Stone's wrist if it's fractured, it's broken? Or I'm confused by that too. I still don't get that. I mean, it seems weird, but this time of year, you just really don't know what's going on. They never want to say anything. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I don't know. Fracture means broken in my book, or am I just too literal here?
Yeah, well, you are too literal to cover. You're not going to be allowed to cover the NHL playoffs if you're going to actually take people at their word and to expect that the definition of what they're telling you is going to be according to Webster and Hoyle. That's just not going to happen. Because I mean, they just don't do that. I just got done interviewing Gary Bettman, and we were both talking about injuries in the playoffs, and I reminded him that the year before he became commissioner in the Stanley Cup final, actually 2 years before he became commissioner, Mike Keenan put a cast put on Jeremy Roenick, so that to prove to the league that he had been severely injured in an attack by a Penguins player. I can't remember who it was. It might have been Kevin Stevens, but that's the extent. That's the extent that they will go to, to put a cast on an uninjured man. So the tradition of hiding injuries is a long one, but they got to get Nyquist going. I think that's one of the big issues. I mean, they have to have goals from Tatar and Nyquist. I think they need to hope that they can get Abdicator back, because I think they need his presence as well. I thought Marchenko's presence changes the defense enough. I think it makes it a little more conservative, and less risk are being taken. I think that's a good thing.
Well, especially with Brendan Smith sitting down, and I don't know. I mean, it was a bonehead play in Montreal, batting the puck and all that. But I wonder if he's ever going to see the ice again. I mean, if this way. I mean, it's pretty, especially since the year he had. Kevin, I'm going to go back. I'm not going to belabor this point, but that's what I'm thinking to myself is, does Ottawa say microfracture, hoping that PK Subban gets suspended? Where it might be just like a bone bruise or something, to try to, because I think Ottawa's still incensed. We saw Chris Neal come out and say, keep your head up, PK, because, I'm coming at you. And then you got to think about Max Pacioretty. If he comes back, and I still don't think he's ready for Game 2, but he's suffering from concussion-like syndromes or symptoms. I guess my point is this, Kevin. Because the league kicked him out of the game, I know it's the playoffs and all that, it looked like to me he skated over, he knew it was Stone, he slashed him. I don't think he wanted to break his wrist, but he wanted to send a message. But it looked pretty deliberate. By them not suspending him a game, have they opened up a can of worms where tonight in Montreal it could be a free-for-all, especially when you let a guy like Chris Neal loose? Or is this what the league wants? Or am I overreacting?
Well, I don't think it will be a free-for-all. Usually what happens in these instances, and I've seen a few of them, the league officials show up in mass. There's a whole platoon of NHL officials show up, and, somebody, probably Coley Campbell, goes in the dressing rooms and warn everybody that there will be severe penalties if anybody starts nuclear war, on the ice. And, generally, that usually works because no one under the penalty of the threat of a penalty of a long suspension, nobody wants to be part of all that. So, I guess the Senators have to decide what's more important: exacting revenge, because the time for revenge, if that's your motive, would be next fall. Not now. So I think the Senators right now need to concentrate on winning the hockey game and worrying about revenge later. And I'm sure that's what league officials are going to remind them of, so that they got to try to win the game.
Well, when I first saw the play, and I didn't see it live, but when I first saw the replay, I'm thinking Bobby Clark in the Summit Series. I'm just going to pick out their best guy, and but again, maybe I'm overreacting to it, because I think what's unfortunate in what happens in incidents like this, because you and I, obviously, we love the game, and these are world-class athletes, and for the most part, all the people that run the league, the administrators and everyone, this is a good group of people. The NHL is a really good league run by fine people. Truly, it really is. But when you see a play like PK Subban, where it looks like he's intentionally trying to injure a person, and that's all you see on SportsCenter, and then he doesn't even get suspended, people come back to me and say, hockey's cool, but it's kind of barbaric, and that's why it's never going to go anywhere. I don't agree with that, but I can see their point. Does the league miss an opportunity to send a message and maybe broaden their horizons when they don't crack down on violence?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I would say the answer is probably yes. I think it just depends on what their mission is. Like, if they're right now they're in a growth era of the game. I mean, their revenue is increasing dramatically. Their television footprint is expanded. Now we're seeing the possibility of Las Vegas. They'd like to get into Seattle if there's an arena. They're for sure at some point in the relatively near future going to be at 32 teams. They're actually pretty happy with the way things are going. But I guess the argument for maybe coming down harder on the extracurricular violence would be that maybe the growth would be exponential if they did that, because there still is the image of the game out there among the non-believers, if we can call them that the game is still has a cartoonish quality to it in terms of its violence. The old Rodney Dangerfield joke of I went to the fights and the hockey game broke out is still sort of prevalent with the non-believers. And I mean, you can certainly make the case that if the league were harsher and took a stand against the extracurricular violence. Now, the problem with that, and I'm not saying that I believe this, but the people who do love the game already, a lot of them who are passionate about it, they like the sort of on the edge, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth style of justice in the league, and they like the idea of the game being policed by the players themselves, and that what stops it from getting from total mayhem is the fear of the other guys embracing vigilante justice. So it's a fine line, because, as I said, everything is really working well for the league right now, and you can't even make the case that the league is not is stunted now, that it's just a little small league. I mean, the revenues are approaching $4 billion now.
Well, I think the good thing is that it wasn't a slash on a New York Ranger or something like that. If that would have put out, a Rangers player, it would have been national news in this country. But since you have two Canadian teams going at it, in a strange sense, maybe the league lucks out because it's a little bit swept under the rug. because Montreal, even though they're the premier franchise in the NHL, 24 cups and all that, it's still not, the top of mind franchise. Or like I couldn't. I saw Ranger highlights constantly last night. You thought that they were the only Rangers and Penguins were the only game going on last night. So I mean, so maybe they lucked out that way. All right, Kevin, I'll get off that little soapbox. I'm not even going to ask if you think PK Subban should have been suspended. But we'll move back to the Red Wings. How do they play better when Tampa has to, even though they're disappointed they lost, like John Cooper said, he didn't say come right out and say, I can't believe we lost the game. He said, I liked everything we did last night. I mean, I don't know how much better we can play. So, they're going to come out and pretty much do the same thing. How does Detroit counter that?
Well, I think it'll be a different game because I think again, I don't think the Red Wings last night were intent on counterpunching. I think they were intent on playing a rope-a-dope game in terms of not pushing hard out of their zone. They wanted to keep everybody back in front of Mrazek, and I think that'll change in the next game. I think when they get the puck out now, they will be looking to try to push it up to the forwards and get in the attack zone. I think you'll have cleaner entries into the zone, and I think there'll be a greater emphasis on getting some numbers into the offensive zone. I think they'll play a little less conservatively, and what happens, it would have been a different game if Tampa would have got a lead yesterday, as we all know, and that changed the game as well. And so I think we're going to have to see how the first 10 or 15 minutes are playing. But, if I was Babcock and I had to coach this team, I'd be looking again to play a very conservative defensive style and play aggressively, through the neutral zone, trying to take advantage of their speed. Because you can certainly, I think we saw yesterday that the Red Wings, although they didn't do it very often, they were effective when they got inside Tampa Bay's defense. So, they gave up some goals this season, as we know. But it's hard to push the defense up against Tampa Bay because then you leave yourself vulnerable to their counterattack.
Right, and and we've seen, and truly, Steve obviously has molded this team like the Red Wing teams of old, because they certainly are relentless, and they can roll four lines at you too. I mean, it's pretty incredible to watch, and their defense, the guys are all behemoths there, and I have to agree with you. As great as Victor Hedman is, and he is going to win the Norris Trophy, Strawman is incredible. He was incredible out on the ice again last night too. I mean, this guy plays a complete game, and he seems to be everywhere.
Yeah, and he's much more offense-oriented in Tampa than he was in New York. And, Cooper just really does a nice job with his, I like his line combinations quite a bit. He seems to have has a great understanding of what goes into having very effective lines. And because they seem to have, a score on every line. They seem to have a guy that handles the defense on every line as well. And they just keep coming at you. It really does remind you of the way the Red Wings used to play in the glory days.
Yes, it does. I mean, and that's why I said Eisman's got to be shaking his head and said, I've done my job too well. They're too much like the Red Wings. They get beat by a hot goalie and can't get, no matter what they do, they can't get the puck across the goal line. Kevin, let's look at tomorrow's game. How do you see it unfolding? I agree with John Cooper. I can't imagine Tampa coming out any harder than they did in Game 1.
No.
So how does this play out tomorrow?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, but to me it's very similar to what of the series I'm covering here in Nashville. Like, Nashville came out and took a 3-0 lead in that first period, and for the most part, with the exception of the second period, they did everything they wanted to do against Chicago. I mean, they were attacking aggressively. They had a lot of quality scoring chances. They played a physical game. They did everything but win the game, and I think Tampa Bay can say the same thing. They did almost everything they wanted to do. They just couldn't get the puck by Mrazek, and Nashville couldn't get it by Darling. And you know what Nashville has said, and I think that Nashville players have said, and it's certainly true for the Red Wings, is they have to all be better on an individual basis. Like you know, Nashville will be looking for their top players like Forsberg and Ribeiro to step up and make individual plays and be difference makers. And I think that the same is true for Detroit. Like they've got to get more shots on goal. So what that means is Tatar and Nyquist and Shan, they've got to click. They've got to come together. They have to put together that chemistry that they had during the regular season. And Datsuk still has to be as good as he was in that first game. And we know what he can do. He's done it at big times, but they can't. They're not in a position that they can have Datsuk have an off game. This team just does not have the same level of depth that, in terms of scoring depth, I'm speaking of, that teams in the past have had. So I think the Red Wings have to have some better individual efforts, guys rising up and not playing average games, but playing exceptional games, and mostly Tatar and Nyquist have to do that, and then the secondary scorers in general have to be better. Like, they need to get another goal out of the fourth line or the third line. That's just imperative.
Right. No offense to either of these players, but if Datsuk, obviously you expect him to score goals, but if you're looking towards Luke Glendening to score goals for you on a consistent basis, unless he's shooting that backhand, of course, it's probably not going to happen. But let me ask you this. I've had several fans say, why Landon Ferraro? I thought this was the guy the Red Wings didn't even want to sign. And like at the 12th hour last year, he signs a deal with for a one-year deal with Detroit, and it's back in Rapids. But I kind of look at it this way: Landon Ferraro won a Calder Cup. He has been an integral part and actually made great strides this season. Maybe getting the message that I'm not getting any younger, even though my dad's Ray Ferraro. I got to prove it on my own. I don't, for what they need, and he plays a pretty controlled game too, and he's a pretty heady player, an intelligent player. So I guess I wasn't that surprised that when Abdicator goes down and Eric Cole's not coming back, and Franzen obviously is done, I would imagine, for the entire year. Instead of going, the big thing is, why don't they bring up Anthony Mantha? Why don't they bring up the Greek kid, whose name, forgive me, Mom, I can't pronounce, so I'm just kind of wondering. But Ferraro almost makes sense, doesn't he? Because he's a fairly safe player. He's a responsible.
Yeah, no, you've answered your own question a couple of times there, and that is that I think it just basically centers on the fact he's a very smart player, and by putting him in there, he knows how to play the good defensive game. He's got it in his DNA. His dad, he's got great hockey sense. His dad, was an exceptional player, and he obviously inherited those instincts. And as he would like to point out frequently, he's a much better skater than his father was, which is certainly true. But I think this gives them the opportunity of putting fresh legs on that fourth line. It gives them an opportunity to put a guy who understands the role of the fourth line player, and more importantly, he has got a bit of offense in him. So now you have a guy who can, maybe to give this line a chance to produce a goal. Like, the tradition of the unknown goal scorer is strong in the NHL. Like, guys step up and they don't score a lot in the regular season. And then they find the net in the postseason. And maybe that's what he's trying to catch lightning in a bottle a little bit.
Well, let's hope so. I mean, if I kind of wondered a little bit about it, and then I looked at it and I said, what, it kind of makes sense for what the Red Wings need right now, and I think they do need to play a little bit more of a controlled game because they're not the run and gun guys that they used to be. And you're right, when Pavel Datsuk isn't scoring or out of the lineup, the Red Wings are a completely different team. But it almost seems for decades, Detroit fans were used to, major injuries, Steve Yzerman going down or somebody else going down, where guys would step up, or they had, enough of an all-star roster where they missed him, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't a devastating blow. Datsuk's not there, it's a devastating blow for Detroit. So we'll see how they, hopefully Pavel stays healthy. That's another key. Kevin, I want to go to tomorrow, 8 o'clock. Something's going to happen that I think that I know that all of Canada is excited about, and regional parts of the United States probably are too. I don't know if the whole country has swept the nation yet. The NHL draft lottery will be revealed. Are you excited? Do you think Buffalo is going to be the big winner one way or another, because they're either going to get McDavid or Eichel? And I want you to put on your your Karnak hat, because I know you're a big Johnny Carson fan, and let me know. The envelope says, where is Connor McDavid ultimately going to go?
Well, I don't think it's going to happen that it's going to be one of the big three. It's not going to be Buffalo or Arizona or the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think it's going to fall outside. I think it's going to be a shot. Like, I think it's going to be somebody like Philadelphia, or because there's only a 45% chance that he'll end up with one of the three worst teams. The odds are that he'll fall somewhere between the fourth and the 14th pick. So that's the first thing. If you ask me where I think it would be best for him to go, I would say the Florida Panthers or the Arizona Coyotes. I just think that Connor McDavid could help either one of those franchises develop an expanded fan base. And I think it would be good for the game to get him in a sort of a non-traditional market and let him grow, sort of like what Gretzky did for LA. When Gretzky in Edmonton was a lot of fun and really sort of created the romance of the Edmonton Oilers, and their mystique was pretty dramatic, even south of the border. But it still wasn't as big as it was when Gretzky went to LA. So I think for that reason, for the league's sake, it would be better if he gets in a market that maybe still needs to build a fan base. But I know there's a lot of folks who believe it would be nice if he could end up in Canada, and the opportunity for that would be the Maple Leafs. Although there might be a federal investigation of the system if the Toronto Maple Leafs end up. I think it's that would be Patrick Ewing all over. Now I will say this: today I was talking with the league official who told me that Gary Bettman, who's there when the drawing is being held, that it's all going to be filmed. I guess that's not the proper term anymore, but it's all going to be available. Yeah, it's going to be all on video, and it will be available on the website because on the television cast of it, they just bring the golden ticket out for Bill Daly to hand. So, but it will all be there. But that won't stop the conspiracy theorists if the Toronto Maple Leafs end up with Connor McDavid. But this is a pretty special day. Like, the big winner already, obviously, is Buffalo, because they're going to get McDavid or Eichel. And I talked to Dan Marr this week for a story that I did about that, and he is the director of Central Scouting, and he basically said it's going to be one of those things like where some years Eichel will be better and some years Connor McDavid will be better. It's not so different than Malkin and Ovechkin, both of them.
So tomorrow night, 8 o'clock on NBC. Now, Kevin, do you know how it's going to work? I mean, because this game, it's going to be during the Rangers Penguins game. It's on national TV on NBC Network, not the Sports Network, but on the free network. And so I think actually it probably plays out very, very well for the league. They probably couldn't have a better team than the Rangers playing Saturday night against Sid the Kid and the Pittsburgh Penguins. And lo and behold, you're going to determine the next destination for two maybe superstars that are going to dictate the history of the game for the next couple of decades.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and we kind of know what it's meant for the league to have Ovechkin and Crosby sort of growing up together at the same time, and those of us who are a little older saw what Larry Bird and Magic Johnson did for the NBA. Like, the NBA took off when Johnson and Larry Bird came along at the same time. So I mean, and I think it's fun too that one's a Canadian and one's an American. There's a natural rivalry there. One's a power guy. Eichel's more of a power guy. Connor McDavid's a finesse guy. They're both offensively skilled. Dan Mars said that, and when you measure their skating, he's not so sure that Connor McDavid is as powerful of a skater as Eichel is, but he is definitely quicker than Eichel. So Eichel's the more powerful skater, and McDavid is the quicker one. And we now know that Buffalo is now set up for a long, lengthy period of time because last year they picked up Sam Reinhart, so now they're going to have two A-level prospect centers that are going to lead the way. Plus, they have a young player in Gergensons, and they brought in Evander Kane. If you look at the Buffalo Sabres prospects, they're going to be good pretty quickly. Like, I'm not sure it's going to take 4 or 5 years. It might be just 2 or 3, and then they're going to be among the top teams in the league.
Right, Kevin, don't take this. Oh, there you are. You're back up. We lost your the video. We didn't lose your audio there for a second, so it was kind of a blank screen.
Okay.
So every time you talk, it goes to blank. But maybe that's just on my end. Maybe the people are seeing you because I know that they want to. With that said, when you look at Connor McDavid, could we see? And I'm just doing this just because I got to throw a jab to all our Canadian listeners out there because there are a lot of them and a lot of Leaf fans. Could we see an Eric Lindros put the jersey on, not if the Leafs get him and say, I don't want to go there. Almost afraid. Because what I've heard, he would really like to go to Phoenix and play with his buddy Max Domi. And they think that they could really do something out there. So, but obviously McDavid's going to go where whomever drafts him. But I mean, it's pretty fun to think that, here's this guy who is, we've heard about Connor McDavid for years now. I can remember going to a Joey Scotia softball charity function in August 4 or 5 years ago, and they were talking about Connor McDavid. And at that time I think he was like 11 or something. I mean, it's just odd. And here, if he had his way, he'd like to play in, Phoenix with his buddy Max Domi. I mean, maybe that's why you want to go there, but I would think that if a guy who's a really great hockey player, I don't think Phoenix would be the first market I'd want to go to.
Yeah, no, but maybe that says something about him. And as I said, I think it would be good for the league to get him in a market like that where there's some growth potential. And all I can compare it to is obviously what happened with Gretzky and the rollerblade craze in California that ended up resulting in California having players from that state who were drafted. Bo Bennett of the Pittsburgh Penguins, Emerson Atem in Anaheim. There's been 3 or 4 California kids that have been drafted high in the draft that basically resulted from Wayne Gretzky being traded. And I think the same could happen in Arizona with Connor McDavid or even Florida. I mean, imagine if Florida won Connor McDavid and he'd end up with Jaromir Jagr next season. Jaromir Jagr has T-shirts that are older than Connor McDavid, and he could end up playing on the same line with him, and that wouldn't be a bad person to learn from because Jaromir Jagr has incredible passion, for the game. So I'm not usually interested in what's going to happen in the lottery to the point that I would not want to be at a game, but I think this is going to be a big night because there's a lot at stake here.
Yeah, there certainly is. I'm actually looking forward to it. Kevin, I want to go real quickly look at the series, one game played in each of them, and just get some thoughts of where you think it may go. Let's start off with the Islanders-Capitals. I think we both like the Islanders in this series,
yeah. But
I was surprised at how much they dominated Washington on Washington's ice in Game 1.
Yeah, what surprised me was I thought this was going to be one of the most entertaining series. I thought it was going to be really tight, and to be honest, that was kind of a boring Game 1. I didn't think the Capitals played well, and that was very surprising for me, given Barry Trotz. But I think maybe this game's just not going to, or this series may not be as close as we thought it was, unless the Capitals figure out how to stop that runaway train of an offense that the Islanders have.
Right. Well, we'll see tonight. That'll be good. All right, let's go to Montreal and Ottawa. I guess the story here, besides PK Subban and the slash and whatever a microfracture is that Carey Price has looked pretty mortal about the last month of the season. I mean, mortal is he's given up 3 goals a lot lately. Concern there, and has the Hamburglar finally, met his Big Mac, shall we say?
Yeah, well, it's I picked against the best goalie in the league. I think Carey Price is going to win the Vezina and the Hart, and yet I picked Ottawa to win this series. So this is big for the Senators tonight, and I'll repeat what I said before. If they're interested in exacting revenge for what Subban is, they're going to find themselves down 0-2. Now's not the time to do that. They need to win this game. If they win this game, they can still win this series. So this is a big game for the Senators, not because they need to avenge what happened to Stone, but because they want to win this series.
And, we'll go back. We're going to end with the Blackhawks Predators because you're there, and it sounds like everybody's getting ready for a media meal or something's going on. But we'll go last to that. Let's go to the Flames Canucks. If you're the Canucks, you got to be shaking your head. What the heck happened to us? I mean, we seem to be in control of this game, and lo and behold, Calgary, who I don't know if they led the league in third-period comebacks. And I don't know if they led the league in, last-minute goals, but what an incredible win by the Calgary Flames against the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, I picked Vancouver in this, and I still like Vancouver, but you got to really tip your cap to the Flames. I mean, that is a relentless hockey club that truly does not give up.
Yeah, well, they had 10 third-period wins this season in the regular season, and with come from behind wins. That wasn't tops in the league, but where they were tops in the league was third period goals. They had 99 of them in the third period. They scored more goals in the third period than in any of the other periods. And they really believe in their ability to come from behind, and they've been doing this now. And I keep telling people that. I mean, everybody seems to think this is kind of their one-season wonder, but they started this at the middle of the 2013-14 season. So they've been at this now for a year and a half of just being able to find ways to win in that third period. So I think at some point we have to say, this is who they are. This is they're pretty good at doing this.
Well, yeah, they certainly are. I mean, I'm looking forward to that game. I know we already talked about the Red Wings and Lightning. Wild and Blues, strange. It looked like St. Louis didn't really figure, hey, we got to start scoring some goals till the third period of the game last night. The 4-2 was the final. It was pretty much a one-goal game. A couple of empty netters there. Like I said, if not now, when for the Blues? I mean, but Minnesota seems with Dubnyk and Nat, and I don't know. Maybe. I picked St. Louis. I'm still going to stick with it, but I did not like what I saw from the Blues in Game 1.
Well, what's interesting about that game is I think it's a reminder too of the difference between being a favorite for the Stanley Cup championship and your coach being in danger of losing his job. It's just so slim. Like, if the Blues get knocked out, Ken Hitchcock may be gone. And I see him as a favorite to win the Cup. I mean, that's the way this league is now. Peter Chiarelli just lost his job in Boston. It's only been 4 years since they won the Cup, and then he's out of a job. And Dan Bylsma won in 2009, and then he was out of the job last summer. And it doesn't take much. So, I still think both those teams are Stanley Cup contenders. I think St. Louis now has to win the next game. They can't afford to fall back 0-2 because this Minnesota team is really good. But it was a pretty impressive win by Minnesota. Rangers
and Penguins, that'll be Saturday night. We'll know where Connor McDavid and Jack Eichel are going by the time they drop the puck. National television game on NBC. Everyone picked the Rangers, as we were joking, in 3. But Pittsburgh, they're pretty, as long as you got Sid the Kid and Malkin, I'm not going to. And Fleury, has been pretty good in net this year. a little bit closer maybe than people thought, but still, the Rangers are they're just too good. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. No, they put up a fight, but the Penguins did. But they still look like an easy out to me. And I haven't changed my position. And they're beat up, and they're doing what they can. But again, the Rangers found a way, as they have in the past, to keep Crosby at bay. And the only way the Penguins can win is if Crosby has an incredible series. And I just don't think they have the personnel anymore to support that. You still got to have guys to play with. Look back at, Wayne Gretzky had Yari Curry. He had Mark Messier with him on the power play. Brian Trottier had, Mike Bossy. Mary Lemieux, didn't often have, great players, but, that was a different era. The 1980s was a little easier to score than it is in the NHL today. So I just don't know that the supporting cast is good enough to help either Crosby or Malkin win the series.
The Jets and the Ducks, I guess the name of the I kind of like Winnipeg. But what I don't like about Winnipeg, I thought we saw it last night against the Ducks, is that sometimes they would rather go for the big hit and kind of play a little bit more undisciplined, which costs them in penalties. I think if they played a little bit more controlled, be abrasive, but I think it came back and haunted them. And a team that you do not want to put on the power play, and once they start rolling, you don't want to get Getzlaf and Perry feeling good about that. That's why the Penguins were, for the most part, fairly successful against them, is because they were in Corey Perry's head for almost every series, and he just last night he was a superstar, and I think the problem is that Winnipeg has to play more disciplined if they think that they're going to if they have any chance of upsetting the Ducks, and they did not do that last night.
No, that's right. I mean, Winnipeg's a good team, but they have to play pretty flawless to beat the Ducks. We talked before. Anaheim probably didn't get enough credit this season for the year they had. The Winnipeg Jets, as impressive as they were to get into the playoffs, and they really played well down the stretch to get in, and Pavlik played well. But they have to take it to another level. And as you mentioned, they can't play undisciplined. They can't take penalties. They have to play almost a flawless game, and they certainly didn't do that against the Ducks.
Well, we'll see. Let's go. You're in Nashville. Sounds like the press is eagerly awaiting. You're sitting in the press room there. I don't know if it's like the press room at Joe Louis Arena, meaning you eat in that room and work in that room. There are separate bathrooms, though. But aside from that, let's talk about this game. Obviously Predators came out. I saw that 3-0 score. I'm thinking, whoa, Nashville's for real. They end up losing in double overtime. Duncan Keith, former Michigan Stater, scores the goal. Crawford goes out. Darling comes in. And I'm watching the game because, again, I was watching another one, so I wasn't sure of what was going on. I should have put the old picture-in-picture. And I'm going, boy, Corey Crawford, what did he do to his mask? It doesn't look like the same guy. What's going on? Matter of fact, he kind of looked, I don't know, stocky or something. And then I kind of realized, wait a second, this is a different goaltender in there. Looking at it, how big is it for Nashville to win this game tonight? And what's the mood like in Nashville from both teams? You're there. Can you tell us what's going on, and how do you think this game tonight's going to unfold?
Well, it's really a strange situation here for a variety of reasons. I've been in Nashville many times, and it's one of my favorite NHL cities. But what makes it unique, and many of the Detroit fans understand this because they've made the pilgrimage down here, is that often there is a lot of visiting fans in this arena. But like most NHL teams, or I don't know if it's most, but like some NHL teams now, the Predators figured out a way to keep the Blackhawks out. They've limited the tickets to people who have Tennessee zip codes, and so last in the game one, there was only, I would say there was fewer than 500 Blackhawk fans in the arena, which is very unique because they usually come down in here in full force, 2,000 or 3,000. So it was a definite home ice crowd, and it was strange for the Predators because they actually believed they played pretty well, and they did. Like, they had a lot of scoring chances, they put a lot of pressure, and even their collapse, even though they gave up and squandered a 3-goal lead, like, it wasn't like a collapse that we normally would associate with that sort of thing. It wasn't like you could feel it coming. It was just sort of they sort of picked away at it until they tied the score up. So the Predators, even though they lost in double overtime, came out feeling as if they played really, really well. And so I think they're still a pretty confident bunch. They think they just need to repeat what happened, except, they had a very stale second period, and I think they need to come out and, they took the second period off, and they need to come out and play 60 minutes, and I think they feel like they can take the Blackhawks. And I really do feel it's, you're going back in Chicago, and the Blackhawks are a great team. You can't go down there 0-2. Like, they got to win tonight, or they're in serious trouble.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Kevin, let me do some speculation here, because, when other moves away from Mike Babcock, Craig Berube let go today by the Philadelphia Flyers. Does that pave the way for Mike Babcock to go to Philadelphia?
Well, it just opens another spot for him. I actually sat with some NHL folks, had lunch today, and without going into specifics of who it was, we had a lengthy discussion about his future, and let's just say that dollars were bet on where Babcock was going to end up. And a guy who is pretty knowledgeable, we put dollar bills in, and we signed and said where we thought he was going to end up. And I put my dollar bill in, and the guy that I really trust in this situation said he's going to Toronto. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, he just felt that Babcock has done it all, and that he's more of a Toronto guy than a Philadelphia guy or an Anaheim guy or even a Detroit guy. He's more of a Canadian, and he would feel right at home in Toronto, where he'd be celebrated as the gold medal coach coming in. So that was their thought. I put down that I thought he would probably stay. I just think that the team is so poor in Toronto. I think Mike Babcock's about winning, and it will take him forever to win in Toronto with that group.
Well, let me ask you, because we know Babs, and we both like him and admire him. He's a very, very straightforward guy. He tells it like it is, and he is all about winning. But we also know Brendan Shanahan, and I know that they didn't cross too much here in Detroit. I think a year or two, if I'm going off the top of my head. But how do you think the Shanahan-Babcock relationship is going to play out under the microscope in Toronto, where both of them, they're their own biggest fans? And I don't mean that in a negative way, because I've always said, if you're going to succeed in a highly competitive field like the NHL, you better be your own biggest fan, So, because you're not going to have that many, fans rallying behind you, just the nature of the sport. Unless Brendan thinks, he's a great coach and that's what I need, I'm not so sure that their work environment could even bring a playoff team to Toronto, let alone a Stanley Cup champion. But again, I could be overthinking.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is I don't know how Mike Babcock would feel about the setup there. Like, you've got Mark Hunter. You have a young assistant general manager there as well. They're going to bring in another GM as well. It's almost like an oligarchy that they're setting up here.
Right.
And Mike Babcock is the kind of guy that is going to want to say in the personnel. So there may be too many chefs already in the kitchen. To bring in Mike Babcock and give him the sort of power he is going to want to be able to control his own destiny. So I don't know if it's the right fit or not, and but I still insist, and I said this today to everyone, I don't believe for a minute that Mike Babcock has made up his mind what he's going to do. I think he just is going to let it play out and see what his options are and then make his decision.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, I think that I guess he could go to Toronto. I think that I would say this: if he ends up going to Toronto, it'll be fascinating watching how that unfolds between him and Brendan and the whole Toronto press. And I know the Canadian press loves him right now. Let's see how that thing goes. Chiefs coach, and they're still see where the love affair is, and hopefully it won't be on Discovery ID channel or something, But we'll have to see about that. Kevin, we've run out of time. Thanks for bearing with me. I don't know if people know, I'm really, really sick. And so I'm all on antibiotics and all kinds of stuff. And during this podcast, I can see beads of sweat because I have a fever. And so hopefully I haven't been grossing out people too much. Evan, your screen froze about halfway through this. So whenever you talk, we could hear you. But all we saw was a blank screen. I wish it were the other way around, that no one could see me because I am a little wicked right now. But aside from that, great job, Kevin. Really look forward to it. We'll try to do this again, I would believe, on Monday. But I don't know what your schedule's like, if that's even possible.
Actually, Sunday might be better because it would be after Saturday's game, and I'll be on the road in Pittsburgh on Monday. So I think Sunday might be a nice time to do it. We can sort of analyze Saturday's game. I don't know where you're going to be. So.
No, you know what? I'll tell you what. Sunday would work out because, well, as you very well know, I'm starting a temporary venture, but a new one I'm excited about at WDET in Detroit, and that begins on Monday. And I got to be there at 7:30 in the morning. For a night owl like me is like really early. So yeah, we'll do it on Sunday, Kevin. Hey, enjoy the game tonight. Really enjoy everything you're writing about, and I know that tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, you and I will be glued to that too because we got to know where Connor McDavid is going. I won't be able to sleep tonight.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, but I'm pretty sure I'll get a good night's sleep. So.
Yeah. That's a savvy veteran, even though I think we're about the same age, you as opposed to me. All right, Kevin, enjoy the game tonight, and that'll do it for this edition of the Red and White Authority, episode 16. Until we meet again, enjoy all the hockey, everyone. For Kevin Allen, I'm Art Regner. Take care. We'll see you. Bye-bye.